Hello everyone, welcome to the GODAN webinar. On behalf of the Global Open Data for Agriculture and Nutrition, it's my great pleasure to welcome all of you for our webinar today. And today we have a very interesting and important webinar, especially for universities around the world. And I'm really looking forward to this webinar from the Presidents United to Solve Hunger, the PUSH initiatives, and we are very happy to have two colleagues from PUSH initiatives with us today, Anne, Adrian, and Cara Newby, who will be sharing some of the developments of PUSH. We'll be introducing you to this important initiative and giving you an overview of what PUSH is, what PUSH is doing, some of the important activities that the PUSH initiative is doing, and give you a overview of all the activities. And hopefully, and we want to also use this opportunity to invite you all to join this initiative through your universities. So we are looking forward to all of your participation in this initiative. So all the participants, I want to also mention that after this webinar, you can ask any questions or any queries you have through the chat window. You should see the chat window icons in your screen. So please feel free to share your questions or queries to Cara and Anne through that chat window. And once the presentation is over, we will answer your questions one by one. And we will be recording this webinar, so we will make this webinar available to everyone after this webinar. So even people who couldn't attend the webinar will be able to get opportunity to learn about these initiatives. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Anne and Cara to share, to help to talk about this PUSH initiative and what this initiative has been doing. So I hand over to you, Cara. Welcome, Anne and Cara.
Okay, thank you so much for having us. So today we're going to talk about what PUSH is, and then we're going to talk specifically about a project that Anne was working on to kind of survey PUSH universities and see what the current state of open data is at colleges and universities. So I want to start very briefly by kind of explaining the structure of the Hunger Solutions Institute. We are housed here at Auburn University, and it started with a relationship with the World Food Program. They were worried that college students didn't really have a sufficient amount of knowledge about hunger issues, and so we kind of started a relationship with them around advocacy, fundraising, and research, and that's what started the Universities Fighting World Hunger. And it was really a grassroots organization, student-led, to get some coalition building behind universities and the problems of world hunger. And then in 2014, in advance of the Universities Fighting World Hunger Summit, we convened a group of presidents, university and college presidents, to talk about, now that we've built this coalition from the ground up, what do we need to do kind of from the top down? We really needed administrative support and a commitment from these universities, not just at the student level, but at kind of a higher level as well, to say, this is something that's important to us, this is something that we support, and this is something that we want to make a priority on our campus. And so that's how PUSH, Presidents United to Solve Hunger, was born. Those who were at that initial meeting all signed the PUSH agreement, and the PUSH agreement, the President's agreement to, I can't remember the exact acronym. We'll look at that in just a minute. Is just a statement by the president saying that this is something that's important to us. This is something that we want to make a priority on our campus. So PUSH is an international consortium of universities. We believe that universities have the collective mission to end hunger and poverty both locally and globally. Currently, over 100 university presidents from 5 continents have agreed to make food and nutrition security a priority on their campus through research, instruction, student engagement, and outreach. And so real briefly, before Anne talks specifically about one of the projects that PUSH has done, I want to help you kind of navigate the page. So if you go to our page, which in the chat box, I've already put a link to the page, it's pushttosign.org. once you come to the web page, if you are looking for the actual president's commitment, you can come here and hit this button, sign here, and you can download the actual president's commitment to food and nutrition security. If you are looking to create a campaign to get behind, for your president to get behind and try to encourage your president to sign, there's also a toolkit here that includes a lot of information, such as a petition, flyers, things like that, if you are a student or faculty member who wants your student to sign, wants your president to sign. So there are some resources there that you can use. You can also find the GODAN report, which is what we're going to talk about today, here under resources, and you can find more information about the purpose of the study, which we'll talk about today. You can also find links to the GODAN donor report, which we'll make mention of today, and the APLU open data report, which we'll also make mention to. You can also find the link to the full report here as well. So if you guys have any other questions about PUSH, we'd love to hear them. So the process for becoming a PUSH school is that your president signs the PUSH commitment, and that's the commitment that food and nutrition security is going to be a priority on their campus, and you can read through exactly what that commitment entails online. And then once the president has signed, typically the president will appoint what we call a PUSH point, and that is the main point of contact at the university. We realize that university presidents and chancellors are very busy, and so we also wanted to have a faculty member or someone who may be doing like student advising around this issue or something like that. So typically there is a point of contact that we have at the university other than just the university president. And so from then on, the communication that we will have will be to both the president and to the PUSH point. All right, so that's kind of a brief overview of PUSH. And now I'll let Ann talk specifically about a project that we've been working on in partnership with GODAN.
Okay, and I had to unmute. Thank you, Kara. I really appreciate you, sharing about PUSH, because sometimes, we talk about it very quickly, and so it's good to hear, that explanation and how others can kind of advocate to their presidents to join PUSH. And if you all have any questions about PUSH, we'll wait until the end to ask them. One thing, Kara, I may ask you later on is you showed the 3 initiatives of Hunger Solutions Institute and End Child Hunger. So at the end, we may let you give a little explanation about what we do with End Child Hunger here at Alabama, because it's a local thing, but it is a very networked kind of oriented initiative. So what I want to talk about is the study that we did in partnership with GODAN, and we look at the PUSH universities as a network, and so we look to those universities, particularly as we're looking at open data and what that may have to do with ending hunger worldwide. So we decided to look at the PUSH universities and see where those universities were in open access and open data. And so that process started with looking at what those universities have online as far as open access and open data. And then the next step we did is we identified university representatives within the universities who might have institutional knowledge about their policies. And Kara mentioned the PUSH point. So many times we started with those contacts and then found other people within the university who we could interview. And we conducted those interviews, and we asked things around about their policies, about what infrastructure they have, what kind of support they have for helping faculty, and those practices of open access and open data. And then we compared what we found with the GODAN report. Kara mentioned on our website, when you're looking at our report, you can see the GODAN report. And so we wanted to see, when we're looking at universities, how that compared to the GODAN study when they were looking at the funders and those research programs. And then we, of course, ended with some recommendations. And so, Kara, if you want to go to the next slide. And so what we found was that out of the 99 push schools, we actually have more than 99 now. We have over 100 push schools. But at the time, with those 99 schools, we found just online, 15 of them had open access policies. Most of those access policies really looked at providing license requirements. They specified how faculty can share their work. And then they also many times had ways that faculty could waive that requirement. We also found that no school that we looked at had an open data policy online. I mean, there just wasn't one out there. And then the other thing that we found was that the open data and the data management planning is really pushed by the funders' requirements. And this came through specifically in our interviews. So if you can move to the next slide. And so to give you an idea about who we interviewed, our goal was to have 15 universities that we could interview, but we only got 9. And there's some reasons for that. As when we were asking the people within the university to participate in these online video interviews, most people said this is not really under my under my purview. And in a lot of cases, there just isn't any one person at these universities that are it's looking at just the open data and open access. That you see some scattering of that within some universities. And so we had to work really hard to find people at these 9 universities, and we just kept working, trying to get more. And this is what we ended up after several months of trying to go through the process of finding people to interview. Most of these are land grants that we, in the U.S. Stenton is not in the U.S. and we were able, well, I think one reason we were able to get more people from the land grant universities is our relationship as Auburn University is a land grant, and we were able to identify people there to talk with. We interviewed people that were vice presidents or associate deans of research. There were some people from the Office of Sponsored Programs. There were librarians, there were data management specialists, some IT people as well. And so we feel like we got a pretty good cross-section of the university when we're looking at policies. And so, Kara, if you want to move to the next slide. So what the interviewees said, and when we were talking about open data, again, there were no universities that had open data policies, but even so, interviewees recognize the benefits of open data, and they mentioned that the research can happen more quickly, can move through the system, innovation can happen more quickly as a result of open data and sharing data among researchers and even with the public. They recognize that it can provide some transparency to research. Those that had seen, like the librarians, for instance, who had worked with faculty on sharing their data, the librarians were talking about how researchers are finding that when they share their data, they are getting increased citations and recognition for themselves as well as for the university. And I also, as a result of sharing their data, they can really find other researchers to collaborate with. And so it was really pretty interesting to hear some stories about how that came about with some researchers. And then it is also to connect researchers in across disciplines and across locations. And so when we're looking at solving complex problems, we can connect across disciplines, then of course that helps. And then again, providing solutions to wicked problems as a result of more people seeing the data and seeing ways to use it and find solutions, whether it is finding applications for using that data or actually doing more research and finding things that are of value that way. The interviewees, of course, talked about their concerns, and privacy was one of those, and that's the privacy of the subjects of the research. And so, of course, most of us are very familiar with Institutional Review Board for Human Subjects. And so there's those kinds of concerns, but also in providing data when maybe it's physical data, but it's linked to an individual. So for example, maybe a poultry science researcher is doing some work across different poultry farms, and maybe there's only one poultry farm in, say, Jackson County, Alabama, then that can end up being able to identify that person. So that kind of privacy, they really want to protect the people that they're doing research with, and that's just one example. There are several others. And almost, I guess, all interviewees at some point talked about protecting the university and the faculty intellectual property. And most of the time it was really about their own, the faculty intellectual property, but many talked about the university wide. And so, it's becoming more and more important for universities to get those research funds and in doing so, and when they have the research and it can lead to other findings or even some kind of income for the university, then there's a lot of protection around that. And then they talked about ownership of research, whether it's published and not published. And these discussions were kind of all over the board as to who owns the research, who owns the data. And what we were finding is that there's just it really is a lot of confusion out there as to whether the faculty themselves own the data or the university or both. And in one university, the policy says that the data belongs to the university and the research belongs to the university, but in practice, the faculty practice as if they are also owners of that. So there's and then in this particular topic, as we are looking at changing or looking to develop open data policy, we almost have to start really first at who owns it and how that is described at the universities. Also, there were concerns about funders' contract requirements, and this is on two different levels. One are those funders that require open data and data management plans, but then there are also some funders that don't want their data to be published, and so we find that to be true, particularly when private industry is funding the research. And then there definitely were concerns over resources to provide the management of the data and securing that data. And so it is increasingly a lot of pressures are on universities to share this data, but then there are not resources already available, and that's not just particularly right now with the support and maybe immediate infrastructure, but looking at it from a long-term standpoint. And just a little side note here, although this didn't come up in our interviews recently, here at Auburn, we're talking about open data and how we can help faculty comply with those funders' requirements. And at the same time that we're finding the federal agencies requiring data sharing and data management, there's also some federal and other requirements on securing the data. And those seem like two different problems that are at the ends of the spectrum, but really we can work on those together. But that, like I said, the security data from a security data management from a requirement, a federal requirement, didn't come up in our interviews, but we are seeing that being an increased problem. And so, and then the last thing that we were, the interviews talked about is the faculty not understanding the license options. And so, there's all rights reserved as well as public domain, and then things like open license with Creative Commons. Faculty are not really in tune as to what those options are, and so there's some education around that as well. So Kara can move to the next slide. One of the things we wanted to do was to compare what we were finding with the GODAN report. And we also, and it's not mentioned here, but we also ended up looking at what we found in relation to the Association of Public Land Grant Universities Open Data Report. And so prior to our completing our study, GODAN had conducted a study using the DIPCA and USAID and the Bill Gates Foundation as funders of research, and to look at what their policies were on open data and open access. And so we wanted to see how ours study compared to that one. So Kara, can you move to the next slide? The GODAN recommendations provided, they say, that there just needs to be resources for researchers and program managers to have their data open and with data management plans, as well as standardization. There was a recognition that from the funders that these resources aren't there, and so can these resources be provided as part of the funding of those programs? The other thing that they looked at is that researchers need to be rewarded for providing quality data. So it's not just that we want to share the data, but we need that data to be of quality and be able to be found and reused. And then they talked about fostering a culture of openness and collaboration, and that's something that we also talked a bit about in our report, in our study. But what we were finding is that when funders require open data, that's pushing the open data kind of initiative at universities. And then in some cases, when faculty do share their data, they are finding the benefits. So the culture is something that, of course, can be worked on. But what we found is when it really is happening, it's happening because the funders are requiring open data. And then there's needs to be some monitoring of the policy, that it's pretty easy to have a policy, but then not go back and check and see that the data is being shared and shared in a smart, good way. And then the last thing is is there, are there ways to provide shared tools with the data publication and with other platforms? And so, the GODAN report really pointed to that, that the funders are recognizing some of the issues that researchers may be having around data management and open data, and they're looking at ways to contribute to better solutions. And so, and we were similar in the things that we were finding. The grantees struggle with data quality, effective data management. How can the funders and researchers come up with responsible ways of data sharing, standards and that sort of thing, that really will allow for accessing data in a way that helps research. And so there's also, we found that, there's not enough budget in the funders' plans and in the projects to make sure that data is being shared openly and the infrastructure, and actually just not just the infrastructure, but the process of sharing their data. And excuse me. Also, there's not always a clear way as to how researchers should share their data. And this was something we found in our report. Particularly, there was a realization that when we were interviewing people across the university, and we weren't necessarily working with agriculture, but we looked at all disciplines at the university, and some disciplines are further along in sharing their data within their research community. And so, and then for those research communities that don't have mature repositories and processes in place, the faculty sometimes are just, not just kind of hanging out there as to what is the best way to do this. And so, and Kara, can you just move the slide? So, the push recommendations are straightforward, and these are very, very similar to the APLU recommendations. And one is communicating the benefits of open data. There's still, there's a lot of reasons that faculty don't want to share their data, but they also may not understand the benefits of that. And particularly, in increased citations and building their own reputation, they may not realize how open data can move towards that, but also the greater good benefits. And then we want to create some alignment between the funders' expectations and the university capabilities. Like I said, the resources aren't there necessarily for some disciplines to show their data and to manage that and keep it long-term. And so how can we align what the funders need, and actually for the greater community, how can we align what we have available to us and what we're capable of. And then there's a really big need to improve the faculty's ability to comply with open access and open data. Very recently at Auburn, we had a College of Agriculture faculty member see that there were data management plans that are required now on some of the grants that weren't before. And he came to the librarians and came to the dean and said, okay, how do I do this? And so getting that ability improved at the faculty level is important. There are ideas of course, education, workshops, that sort of thing, but also beginning with the graduate students and including including data management planning and sharing data at that level as well. And then really looking at the policies at the university is really important. Like I said earlier, it may need to start at the ownership of data, and then refine or even develop these policies for open access and open data. As we said earlier, there weren't really any open data policies out there. And just a few had open access policies. I will say that there was actually two universities that do mention compliance with the funders on open data, and there's some processes in place at a couple of universities, but as far as an open data policy within a university, we just didn't find it. The other thing is that there needs to be a need for creating infrastructure, and that infrastructure could be at the university level. Certainly the support that should happen for faculty should be there, but it also, we need to be looking at infrastructure within the disciplines, and infrastructure that maybe somehow the funders can help with too. So there's a lot of options from creating that infrastructure, so it doesn't always have to happen within a university. So now we're ready for questions, and so I see one in the chat.
Thank you very much, Anne and Cara. Very interesting presentation, and really looking forward to participants. So may I request all the participants, please start sending us the questions through the chat window, and then we can ask them one by one. So one question from Claudia Holland, who is asking, funders should own the data if the project is sponsored. To me, the question is, are the data copyrightable or not? If not, then the data is in public domain and must be made openly available as soon as possible. So any feedbacks, Anne or Cara, on this?
On the, I'm not all that familiar with all of the U.S. federal agencies and how they fund research projects, because it varies from agency to agency. But from a federal agency standpoint, and they're funding the university to do the research, I don't, other than a requirement or a contract agreement that would say that the federal government would own the data and the university wouldn't. I don't think that happens a whole lot. I think that the university owns that research, and so that particular question, it certainly can be challenged. I think from the researcher standpoint. When we're looking at private industry funding the research, there may be some things that are listed like that's owned by the funder, particularly those private firms. And in that case, I'm sure that the data is protected and would not be public domain.
Thank you, Anne. And may I also ask one query, because just following up on this, for example, the open access, from your experience, the open access policy, and its impacts. For example, in Europe, the Horizon 2020, I understand, any project funded through Horizon 2020, the outputs. So the funder itself has put them in mandatory that the outputs need to be published through open access. So in that case, it's a big, when the funders specify that, then it's a big boost for the open access. So before that, even 10 years back, when I remember in the university, it was difficult. The change when the funder themselves say, we are supporting the open access policy and we want, because it's publicly funded research, the outputs need to be made publicly available. So for example, in the US, what is the current situation in open access publications, especially for publicly funded research projects?
Yes, so in the U.S., some of the federal agencies, as they're funding this research, they are requiring that the research be published in open access, but not all of them. And it's
right.
And so it varies from agency to agency. And just like the open data policy from these federal agencies, they're different from one agency to another. Look, I think, for instance, it's a NIH, and that's National Institute for Health, have been requiring open data and open access for a while. In certain projects, but USDA, for instance, in their funding, they're now requiring, I think, data management plans, but they haven't really started with the open sharing the open data yet. But that's coming down, so there's a lot of variety on that, and so we see it on the data side as well as access to the publications, which to me brings up another point that we did not look at this in our study, but it's coming out more and more now with this idea of sharing the open data and access to the publications. That to me it's that we really have 3 or 4 different organizations or communities that we need to engage in coming up with some smart open data policies and infrastructure and support. So what I mean is that we have the publication journals that have their role, and some of those are now providing ways to share data. And then of course we've got the universities as well as the funders, whether it's federal or if it's a foundation like the Gates Foundation. And then we have our research communities. So I mentioned earlier that some disciplines are further along in sharing their data. So you see this in pharmacy and in the medical fields, where the data is not necessarily open to the public, but it is open to the research community. So it's closed within that research community, but then the research community has access, kind of across the board. But one reason that works is that the infrastructure's there are standards there, that sort of thing. So in order for these disciplines that don't have that, how do they get there? And to me, it's bringing all of those organizations together to come up with solutions for the whole area. For instance, the Society of Agronomy and those could be very big players in advancing open data, particularly for agriculture.
Thank you very much, Anne. We will wait for the questions to come. And may I also use this opportunity to inform everyone that the website. I think Kara has sent the website through the chat window, pushtossign.org, which is for example, if your university is interested in supporting this initiative, it is a from my understanding, it's like a moral pledge. Am I right, Anne? So it's from the university. You don't have to commit anything else. It's like a moral pledge by the university that that the university is supporting this high-level kind of initiative. So please forward it with your with all the details to your vice chancellors or presidents of your university. And if any queries, you can directly contact both Kara's and Anne's emails are here, so you can directly contact them for any queries.
Yeah, I think one of the advantages of being a PUSH university is that you're part of a network. And so, and there are opportunities that come across, whether it's at a annual meeting or even throughout the year, participating in ideas and thoughts around ending hunger. So.
Yes, so that is really important. So especially I was looking at the the participants, and I didn't see many universities in Africa and Asia. So those of you who are attending from Africa and Asia, please please spread the message to your colleagues there. Inform them about the website and also tell them about this initiative. I did when I was last week in Nairobi, I made sure to inform a lot of colleagues in Africa on this. So please spread this to for example Asia. I can see some of the participants from different regions. So wherever you are, please share the ideas within your communities and join. It's very easy. It's a web form, so you can inform your the faculty who is responsible for, especially most of the universities are anyway doing research in food security, global food security. So inform them. They will be more interested to join this. So please do share these ideas to the wider communities within your universities.
Yeah, so one of the initiatives of the Hunger Solutions Institute is End Child Hunger, and then it's a local. It's more of a kind of started out as more of a state of Alabama initiative, yes. And I would like Kara to kind of describe that a bit, because I think those kinds of things can come out of a push university is what you can do at a local level. So Kara, could you kind of talk about the End Child Hunger as just a network?
Yeah, so we realized a few years into this project with the Hunger Solutions Institute that we had the universities fighting world hunger, and then we had a push, but we really weren't engaging the community in Alabama. And so End Child Hunger in Alabama is just again, the HSI is serving more as a convener, trying to bring together all the organizations that are working in the area of hunger in the state of Alabama. And so we have meetings every other month just to bring people together to talk about the work that we're doing and to try to build a coalition around that work. And I think that, yeah, it has been a great opportunity, not only for us as the university to learn more about what's being done in the community, but for community members to learn from each other and to learn about grant opportunities, to learn about funding around the state. And we learned through that, just as an example, that there was money from the government being left on the table because there was an initiative that was being funded, but there weren't enough organizations that were doing it. And so it really allowed that project to expand throughout the state. So I think that the university can serve as a convener and to try to bring together, because we all know that this work is not just being done at the research level at the university, but it's also being done in the community in a variety of ways. And perhaps it can be the role of a university to extend the work that they're doing into the community.
Excellent. Thank you, Karen. Did I understand correctly that you're also looking at not only the faculty but the wider student communities within the universities to engage in their ways to this initiative, right?
Yes, so the Universities Fighting World Hunger is a way to engage the students directly, and that is an effort to try to encourage fundraising, outreach, advocacy, really not only educating students about the issues around hunger, but helping give them a voice to be an advocate for hunger issues, and then also engage in fundraising, whether it's for a larger international organization like World Food Program or FAO, or if it's for a local organization like doing a food drive for the local food bank or something like that.
Okay, and can I also ask one question on, because you mentioned like the annual meeting or annual conference you are having. So how long has it been going, and what is the kind of outputs you are aiming at these events? Is it like bringing together leadership of all key universities and trying to mobilize and expand ideas, and what could you please explain more on that as well?
Okay, so we started having the Universities Fighting World's Hunger Summit every year, and now once we started in 2014, the PUSH initiative, we decided to have just a day and a half leaders conference for PUSH leaders. The day before the Universities Fighting World Hunger. So the Universities Fighting World Hunger is more targeted specifically at students. And then the PUSH Leaders Forum is targeted more towards the presidents and faculty members. And so each year we have kind of a different theme. This year specifically, the theme is going to be fulfilling the president's commitment. So we'll be talking about things like outreach and extending the impact of the university into the community. We'll be talking about, we'll have a panel of people who have signed PUSH to talk about why PUSH was important to them, because I think this year for the first time we are actually going to have some presidents and leaders from universities who actually haven't signed PUSH but may be interested in PUSH. So it'll be both for those who have signed and for those who may just be interested.
Thank you, Cara. So any other questions from the audience? Please send it through the chat window so we can answer them. We can raise them with the speakers. And another, yeah, go on.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've talked about a little bit in theory, is coming up with standards, particularly data standards when we do these research. And so those standards really kind of have to come from the research community. And so when we were doing the interviews, we didn't hear a lot about standards. I think that the universities are in general still pretty early in this idea of data management planning and sharing the data. And so it's just this process of let's make it open. But because we were talking to librarians who work across many different disciplines, and they do help the faculty with certain standards and certain expectations around describing the data. But how do we make the data more machine readable, which then will mean that the data can be shared and utilized and come up with solutions even faster. And so getting to that point of that the data can be readable, machine readable, and exchanged with computer systems. In some disciplines, we are a long way from that. And so, and we didn't hear a lot of that in our interviews. So one of the things that, particularly in the field of agriculture, is maybe looking at the standards that CGIAR is doing, and because there are a few agriculture researchers and programs and associations like CGIAR that are really coming up with some standards. And so there's that piece is really needed. So, we talked about what we heard in the interviews, but that was one thing we didn't hear much about. And so that's the next step really of making use of open data.
Thank you, Anne. And may I also ask, did you in these interviews contact anyone, like, for example, many of the universities have also very active like open education activities, so were you able to contact any of them, some of the faculty in, for example, the the School of Education, for example, they might be very, because I know, for example, some of the universities I'm working with, they have, a lot of them are very active in the open education communities as well. So did you by any chance share ideas with them?
Right. So we were trying to concentrate on policies really. And so we didn't talk to many faculty members. But there were some some librarians who recognize the open education initiatives and saw the advantages of that. But we didn't really talk to any faculty members specifically around open education. Which also kind of brings to me another point is that we have open science, open education, open data, open access, and there's a push for governments to share their data, and so there's an alignment that I think can happen at some point where where sharing of government data is and then laying research data on top of that can give us, some really interesting ways of looking at some of these wicked problems. But so sometimes when I hear open data, they really are talking about open data at the government level, and so. And we were really concentrating on open research data, but there's a lot of data out there that researchers can use, and sometimes they don't even realize that's out there. But I think there's some connection that needs to happen within, sharing of government data as well as research data. So.
We don't have any other questions coming in. So I want to thank you, Anne and Cara, for this excellent presentation and sharing all these ideas. And I want to also reach out to all the participants to please look at all the work that Push is doing. Go to the website and share the information to your university contacts and your faculty and to your vice chancellors and presidents of your universities, and request them to join this initiative and support this initiative in whatever way you can, so that there's a global momentum building up for ending world hunger, and it needs everyone is a contributor and key player in this. So so you can be from your university, you can reach out to your vice chancellors and presidents and invite them to join this, and it will together we all can help build this momentum in a much bigger way as well. So I want to again thank Anne and Cara for the presentations they gave, and I want to thank CTA who are organizing this webinars for us, especially the work done by the colleagues in CTA, Chipo and Chris Addison, who have been helping us with this webinar facilities and making this whole thing possible. So I want to thank all the participants for joining us for the webinar, and we will make sure the webinar will be the links of the webinar will be made available later. And if you have any further questions, feel free to email directly Cara and Anne, and they will be happy to come back to you for any other details. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to welcoming you to a future webinar, GODAN webinar in the near future. Thanks. Bye for now.
Yeah, I want to say thank you too for GODAN. You've been a great partner in this, and we want to continue working with you. And this has just been it's been very good for Push. But also I think that this idea of open data can be really a foundational thing for Push, and so appreciate the support that you've given us.
Thank you very much, and see you all later. Bye-bye for now.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.